So I want to start with you, Felice, if you don't mind. Actually, you know what? I'm going to start with something for all of you. Because we're living in a time of tremendous disinformation, misinformation, and it is moving so fast that you almost can't differentiate between the truth and the lies. So I want to know how each of you define truth in an era where everyone is claiming to have it, but probably nobody does. Chris, why don't you start?
Start with what is truth, or how do you define truth?
How do you define truth in this era?
I think one of the main things is to be firsthand. If you can actually witness it yourself, I think one of the main things has been October 7th. What did it really happen? Was it AI generated? Was it an Israeli false flag? But when you can be there for yourselves, we went down there probably like many of you. We were in Kibbutz Be'eri about 7 days after October 7th. You could see for yourself. You heard the stories from the IDF. You could see the battle scars of the kibbutz. You heard the stories about the humiliation of the people, the mutilation of the people. So when you can see things firsthand, it makes a huge difference that you can report factually what you've seen, what you've heard. I know we were talking just before this about seeing the raw footage from October 7th. We felt an obligation to see it firsthand, to be able to report on it, to be able to tell people this is actually what Hamas did, so you can combat the lies that immediately came after October 7th. So I think being on the ground firsthand to be able to report on that makes the difference where you can combat many of the lies, misinformation, and disinformation that has been so prevalent, and like you said, an avalanche of lies.
Felice.
Did October 7th happen? Did the Holocaust happen? Did 9/11 happen? And that is something that every journalist is trying to fight, that believes in truth and believes in facts. When we look at the word truth, truth is something in the New Testament and the Old Testament. It's in the Talmud, which is the scholarly work of art. It's many books that sit and decipher differences of opinion. It is hard to find truth, but Chris is right. As a journalist, you have to be there. Mayan, you know this well. You have to be on the ground to see. I, too, was on Kibbutz Be'eri and others that first week, and as a matter of fact, scurried to do a documentary standing on the ashes of Be'eri. Why was I there in someone's home I never would have been in? And standing on ashes of 1,200 people that were murdered and killed. John Burkowski this week was the first male to give testimony to talk about the fact that he was raped. He was sexualized and raped. Right, folks? Well, bottom line, why does it have to take the UN to 2024 to come out and say that they agree this actually happened? It was a fact. So the truth is something that some will say is objective, some will say is subjective. I say yes, if you believe in God, it's God's truth. But we as journalists, too, have to seek the truth, story by story, and not make it up.
Truth stems from Hebrew, emet. The understanding and foundation of truth is key to our communication. If we are journalists and we are not expressing truth, then what are we expressing? We're expressing the counterfeit of the reality. We have to, if we have a moral conscience and compass, emet should be a key component of our journalism day after day after day. I think the other element of this, which of course Chris has alluded to be an eyewitness is crucial. But beyond that, there is an element that we often don't talk about, which is the consequences of truth. Once you know truth, you are set free from everything else, and nothing can sway you from that reality. The scriptures say, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. This is a crucial component to our journalism globally, is if we are basing ourselves and our information on second-hand or tertiary information, we are going to come unstuck. We must be driven by the source of truth and true information in order to be recognized as those that can be trusted with integrity, and that should not be swayed from what we do day after day after day.
But Stephen, the reality is today that the public maybe doesn't even want the truth. What is your take on this? I mean, are people looking to get a real story or an accurate story, or are they looking for the information that just supports what they already believe?
That's a great question. We currently live in a world that has echo chambers, And increasingly, because of the advancement, I mean, you think back to even 20 years ago, phones and the access of information was a lot slower than it is today. Things that are going on across the world that I wouldn't have been concerned about 2-3 decades ago, I now know about instantly, and I then have to process what I'm being told through the lens of constructive structure of what I have as my foundation and my moral compass. And everybody has a compass. The question is, what is that compass founded on? If our compass is not founded on character and a substantive source, we are going to be tossed and swayed by every wind of doctrine. And so we have to establish and understand what truth is in order to be able to objectively carry out what we're doing. Yes, the world has a tendency towards their ears being tickled, but just because they have their ears being tickled, we should not be changing and conforming our expression of truth and the reality just because Joe Blogs is not going to listen to it.
So now I want to turn to you, Felice, piggyback on that, because you've spent decades running what you consider a neutral, fact-driven news organization in the Middle East, which is sometimes contradictory nowadays in the Middle East. When everyone's rushing today to publish first, to be fast, what kind of tools have you been able to put into place to ensure that you're actually accurate and fact-driven despite the need to be quick?
The hardest thing is to not rush to tell a story. It's about getting a story right, and I believe that comes first. To be first is nice, but the accuracy is more important. Too often we see that really many journalists are rushing to get it out. We see it every day of the week, and it's a problem. If you look at even what happened with Al-Ahli Hospital during the war, and hundreds of people were claimed to have been killed by Israel, in the end, Israel was not involved in that attack. Look this morning again to see how many journalism institutions got it wrong. And this is a big problem, because that's where we have to hold people accountable to what's being written, both the public and media institutions at large.
And Chris, at CBN, people actually turn to CBN because they aren't so happy maybe with the mainstream media, and they look to CBN to give them the truth. Now, how can Christian outlets actually challenge this mainstream media and the coverage that's there without just creating or speaking to another echo chamber?
By doing what we can and trying to expand the footprint of what we have without being an echo chamber. I just came from just a conference earlier today with CFI, Christians for Israel, and the people from around the world actually were saying they turned to CBN, and I'm sure they turned to many of these news organizations represented in this room because they trust CBN or whatever media line and other institutions. I think that's what I wanted to say. I think is that this battle for truth is the scripture. Besides, the truth shall set you free. Is Isaiah says that truth is stumbling in the streets. And I think we live in that kind of age when truth is stumbling in the streets. And I think it's an exhortation for all of us to do what we can in our own spheres of influence. And I think this summit is so important to network with believers around the world and to understand that we are battling a spiritual battle and that we need to encourage each other. I think Tricia Miller said that last night, to continue to strengthen each other, to be strong, because we are in a battle for truth, a spiritual battle about Israel, about Christian Zionism, about so many of these issues that we're all fighting. And I think that's an exhortation to keep in prayer. And I think these stories also, we can have an impact spiritually. For example, when Joel Rosenberg and I had the opportunity to go into one of the tunnels in Khan Yunis, we were there at the place, just near the place where 12 of the hostages were kept. And we prayed for their release. When we came out, we actually had communion there in Khan Yunis to pray that the land itself would be redeemed, that it would be that it was defiled. The same thing at the Nova Music Festival. We had communion there to sort of redeem what had been defiled, the slaughter of innocents there in Kibbutz. So for CBN, that we want to just do what we can to expand our footprint. And I think that my prayer would be for all of us here, that we could expand and combat what has become maybe the battle for our age, the battle for truth.
And Chris, you're working now on a new documentary series,
Yeah.
right, or a video series. Can you tell us just a little bit about that and how that is going to play into what you're discussing?
Well, in August 17th, we marked 25 years when I came here with my wife Liz and our 3 children, Philip, Kathleen, and Grace. They were 16, 11, and 8. 5 weeks later, the Second Intifada began. So when I came across that 25th anniversary, I thought, well, we can do something about all the stories we're reported on for 25 years. But then it's morphed into something I think much more important, a 7-part series called Israel Under Fire, History, Prophecy, and What You Need to Know to help equip the church with what's going on in Israel, how to combat the lies that are going against this. We shot the first one in Alon Baray. The first one is called From Abraham to Today's Headlines. The second, From the Miracle of Israel. The third, October 7th and the Battle for Truth. Fourth, Palestine from the river to the sea, decoding what can be perhaps the most dangerous slogan in the world. Fifth, Christian persecution and Christian revival. Sixth, prophecy unfolding. And Joshua just explained how much this prophecy is unfolding before our very eyes. Finally, rendezvous in Jerusalem, a call to pastor's prayer and prophecy, and how we can, like Isaiah 62 said, be watchmen and watchwomen on the walls to make Jerusalem a praise in all the earth, like Isaiah 62 says.
Thank you for explaining that. Now, Stephen, I want to go back to you because you live in the United States. Felice and Chris, they're living here. You know, you and I moved to Israel on the same day in the same year. Yeah. So I want to turn to you, living in the United States, and we see that Tucker Carlson has become one of the most influential anti-Israel voices on the American right. But how do you think it happened that this evolution became so popular? What does it tell us about the ability for misinformation, which he wildly spreads, to be able to infiltrate even into trusted media spaces?
I think there is a shift, as Chris alluded to earlier. The truth has fallen in the streets. The fact is that people don't like truth because it makes them uncomfortable. Because if you know what truth is and you don't respond to it, then you are setting yourself up for a fall. And so the unfolding of knowing truth, you are then faced with a collision of, do I move forward knowingly believing or trying to hide the fact that I have an understanding of what is really at stake? And I think this is the key component and the crucial battlefield for everything to do with Israel, is once people come to Israel, it transforms them. Once they see what is going on the ground, once they understand the battleground in its multifaceted way, they are able to adequately defend the truth which is taking place and communicate that effectively. You know, we as Christians in this room are called to communicate good news. That's our calling. And the unfolding of that is very, very important. Now, that doesn't dispel the fact that we have to be objective in telling what is going on across the spectrum politically as well as internationally, and we have the means and mechanisms of news coming to us. I think one of the challenges that we have within the Christian media space, and we have many languages represented, that I would love to see Israel help us in, is getting information faster. Information that is true, that is verifiable, that we can stand on in order to combat the likes of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, some sister that claimed that she knew everything about the Middle East. I can't remember what her name was. But the process and unfolding of this narrative that is being expressed is very, very dangerous. And at any opportunity, I want to encourage you to actually combat what is being said if you know that it's not true.
So how do you explain then, well, let me ask you this. Do you think that the issue is the speed of the government press office and others, the IDF, in giving the truth? Is that why so many lies are told about Israel? Or is there maybe more to it? And how do you explain then the foreign press, CNN, the New York Times, and others who are on the ground in Israel and still misreporting the facts?
Again, I'll say the same thing as I said before. The issue is, once you know the truth, you have to live with it. And there is a verse in the New Testament for Christians which says, let a man so account of us as ministers of the Messiah and stewards of the mysteries of God. Here, moreover, it is required in a steward that they be found faithful. In other words, once you understand something, you can never un-understand it. You have to live with the consequences of what you say and the ramifications of that. And we have these various media news outlets that do not want what Israel tells them is the reality to be the reality. So if I could say it like this, Israel is in macro what these people are in micro. They are a testimony to the fact that there is a God in heaven that you have to answer to for your actions to their neighbor or to their media outlets. Israel is in macro the same thing to the nations, and the nations hate it because every time they look at Israel, they see a society that operates on a different holiday schedule, a society that keeps a day of rest, a society where work is not their God, God is God, and the unfolding of that across societies, this nation reminds the nations that there is an alternative way to live and operate that causes a nation to succeed. And they don't like it.
Felice, when you encounter a story that is false, that has already started to go viral and has spread throughout the social networks and all the media outlets that we just discussed, what is the best way to respond?
To respond. Most people won't respond. Most people look at their neighbor and tell them about it and are afraid to open their mouths. You come here from so many different places around the world, and you can't be shy to fight back as journalists. If you're journalists, if you're influencers, and they're not the same. The journalists need to be feeding the facts to the influencers, and I really want to differentiate between the two, because we have to live in a fact-based society, and it takes a lot of work to do so, to learn how to get a source, what is a story, how to delineate between the two, how to make sure that all narratives are in a story, because if you trust the truth and you trust your God, then you're going to trust that it will stand to truth. And that is very, very important. I do want to bring up about Tucker Carlson for a moment, because has Tucker Carlson been in Israel? Has don't think so, that's right. Has Mamdani, who was just elected as the mayor, he refused to come to Israel. And if these people refuse to come to Israel, they refuse to learn facts. Some people, you cannot change their hearts and minds. But there are so many people that I know Troy Miller has spoken about and others, and Pew Studies are doing all the time. There are young people out there that we know. We vetted 5,000 young people during the war to see how they think. Jews, Christians, Muslims. What were they saying in social media? What were they saying about Israel? What were they saying about the Middle East? Did October 7th exist? They're there. They're interested, and they're interested in long-form information. So that's contrary to what everyone else is thinking today, and that is how you start to vet it and change it.
Chris, while faith can obviously guide journalists toward moral clarity, and we see that here in the room, it can also introduce bias. How do you balance conviction with objectivity when reporting on issues, even those issues that aren't necessarily directly tied to religion?
Well, use the same standards you report on any story. I would say one thing that's beneficial for us, when you're here long enough, you get to understand how things unfold. For example, when right after October 7th and Israel went into Gaza, then Hamas began reporting on death figures. And immediately we understood, we've seen this movie before. They've done the same thing in 2008, 9, 2012, 14, 2021. When you have some frame of reference, then you can understand what's really true and what's not. Unfortunately, much of the media has been reporting the death toll figures verbatim from the Hamas-run Ministry of Health. And so you need to discern what is propaganda, what is truth, what is lies, misinformation or disinformation. So that gives us a grid so that we can understand. We talked about the hospital report as well, and it was hours later, or maybe a day or two later, you got the real story. I would say that even talking about Tucker, just Tucker the other day, he, quote, apologized for calling out some Christian Zionists. But if you listen to the apology, he went ahead and he said, well, the reason I did that is because the IDF had murdered Christians in Gaza, which was a mistake. And I called Nadav Shoshone, the IDF spokesman, and he sent me what they actually reported on after that incident. It was a mistake. They apologized. Prime Minister Netanyahu apologized. But sometimes, as we have said, the lies get out before the truth comes out. So I would like perhaps some of the IDF behave a little faster, but they want to be accurate. They want to be truthful. It takes time, in a battlefield especially, to find out what's really happening. So I think experience helps to really discern what's happening, especially in this environment when Hamas uses propaganda as a tool, as they've done with their false claims of starvation, of famine, and that's where many people they're just uncertain. And that's the reason for what we do at CBN News, to try to get the truth out, which we all try to do, and just combat what the enemy has been trying to do. We are involved in a spiritual war, and I would just add that I think what we do is so important, and somebody mentioned this to me earlier today. When you can report on this, it gives people, Christians around the world, how they can pray about the situation.
Chris, have you ever been stuck, though, where your faith and your journalistic instincts are sort of at battle with each other? They're pulling you in opposite directions? And if so, what have you done about it?
No, I don't think so.
No,
I think we actually, our faith informs us, and we pray every day at 9:30 in the morning. It makes such a difference. So I think our faith, and with the help of the Holy Spirit, to help report on what's happening day by day, that makes a difference. I think our faith is what we depend on, and I don't think there's any contradiction for how we report on what's happening.
Amazing. Now, Felice, I want to be back to you. When we talk about facts here in the Middle East, facts are often weaponized in order to tell a story. You go out, you do an interview, the person seems honest and true, but maybe they've misconstrued the facts to fit a certain agenda. So how do you protect yourselves, how do your journalists protect themselves so that they don't become sort of propaganda tools for those sources?
It has to do with education, and that's core. How you educate your journalists. I believe you're always learning. I'm always learning. The young people that come and work in our office, they're training every single day. We all discuss issues. Thank God for editors. They are the ultimate response, and they're responsible for what we see. And we're human. There has to be some humility here. This is a very difficult job on very difficult time limits. And yet, when young people that we train, we have a training program, and we've had 100 students we've trained that come to Israel and learn journalism, and they sit in leading newsrooms today. They are the absolute gems of what has been created here on the ground to go back and not be weaponized because they've been educated. So that is the best antidote to what you're saying.
And Stephen, I want you to take that question and then also to elaborate about the new media tools. You have so many different hats, and a lot of them involve using video and technology to tell the stories, to tell the truth. And how does that work, in comparison, for example, to print media? What do you see as the difference and which more effective?
It's such a rapidly moving space, and so we have to be quick and adapt. The technology that we have today is different from yesterday. You are now in an opportunistic world with the developments of AI. AI can be used for evil, but it can also be used for good. And so just to give an example, we do a weekly podcast called Israel Matters. You can find it by looking for Israel Matters on YouTube. And we structure it in 3 different components. The first is a rapid news update, what has happened that week. The second part is an interview basis with an expert. A few weeks ago, we had Chris on talking about what he is seeing and how things are out working. We've had various other journalists, and we're open to having other guests as well, depending on what the circumstances are. And then we finish with a word study in Hebrew, because there's a great raft of misinformation and misunderstanding of what the actual words mean in Hebrew. And Her Excellency earlier, Sharon, so wonderfully illustrated in the book of Habakkuk that if we see the words through a Hebrew lens, it helps us to understand what is going on. We mentioned about truth and faith, and these things they're not mutually exclusive. Emet and emunah, which Mayan will be aware, in Hebrew, often a word has a has a visual picture attached to it. And the visual picture that is attached to Emet and Emunah, you know what it is. It's
Truth and faith.
truth and faith, and it's pillars. They're the things that hold up society. If we remove truth and we remove faith from what we are doing, we have a problem. So, technology that is there. You have a lot of long-form content in this room. Some of you, that may be the only thing you are doing. Long-form content has flatlined. The whole next generation is engaging with short-form content anywhere between 0 and 3 minutes.
Well, if it's 0, how are they engaging with it?
Well, that's precisely the point, because some people don't look at it and they don't want to engage with it, but that is the time frame that you've got. And it's all about finding your audience's sweet spot. Some of your audience will only absorb 30 seconds of information. Some of them may be a little bit more capable and be able to absorb 60 seconds of information, and some may even be able to manage 3 minutes. Wow, that's a big number. But the process of it is you have long-form content that is, depending on how long it is, you've got 20, 30, 40 short-form content pieces if what you are creating is of value. When I lived here, I lived with an international speaker, and on Thursday nights, he would give us a passage from the Bible, and he would tell us that we had to talk about what that passage means, and we had to speak for longer than 6 minutes, but shorter than 10 minutes. And then he would brutally critique everything we said and rip it apart. That's discipleship in the media world. You want to get better at what you are doing, so engage with those that have been doing it for decades, learn from them, and adapt using the technology that is now available to make sure that you are getting content out that can be absorbed in a multiplicity of different ways. I was talking with Chris last night. Your long-form content, also because of the technology, is now immediately transcribed. So you have a full transcript. You can turn that immediately into a book, into an audible form, into a podcast. We took a 13-part TV series that we did years ago and have transferred that into a podcast series that is going out all over the world on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. Your content can be repurposed and should be in order to adequately wage the war that we're now in.
I think that was such excellent advice. Such excellent advice. Now, we're going to have only time for one more question, and I want to go one by one. I think, Stephen, we'll start with you. There are, in this room, more seasoned journalists, but hopefully a lot of young journalists of faith are also joining and becoming a part of this Christian media network. So tell me, what kind of advice would you give these young journalists who want to tell the truth in a dishonest world? What would be the first step?
The first step would be a verse a rabbi once said. If I speak with the tongue of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. If you are motivated by hatred and by anger, you will fail in this space. Because your purpose should be defined by love, not by hatred. And once you lay that as your foundation for your journalism endeavor, you will see the blessing of God, the blessing of Hashem behind that, because he loves the fact that he is a God of love and he desires his people to reflect his character. If I can entrust that one thing to you in your journalism, you will see an expansion of it. Do not do things being motivated by that which does not reflect the character of God.
Elise, I'm going to ask you a different question. You and I have had many discussions about whether or not journalism is changing, going away, a dying breed. Tell me, is there any hope for us journalists in the world? Will there, in this room and in the world, is journalism changing to the point that we won't recognize it anymore?
Well, it is changing. And even with what you just said, Stephen, there were debates on that because we, every day in our newsroom, are studying AI and it makes so many mistakes. So if you can't look at what you just transcribed and adapt it, you're going to be putting out misinformation. If you look at a headline and the headline doesn't reflect what's in the story, we have a problem. There's your seconds that you're reading. But I say that we have both. We do have those that want the social media. We have the students today that want to see long form. It does exist. We have the older generation. And with that mix of intergenerations, we have that opportunity today to make that difference. And I say that you have to have persistence in the newsroom. You have to care impeccably about doing things with detail in time. It's both, but also we're living in a world of hate and anti-Semitism.
When I go into security, they say, do you have a weapon? And I'm tempted to say, well, I have a pen. And I haven't done that yet. But I would say to people entering, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Nitsan and the GPO team for bringing us all together. I think more important now than ever, and that the NRB is bringing the NRB here next year as well. I think it's indicative of the battle, the increasing battle that we're facing, and that as someone, Ben, I think earlier said today, we're more like teammates in this battle, in this information war, and I think that just indicative of the battle that we're facing right now. One of the scriptures that CBN News has been employed for decades is found in Chronicles. The sons of Issachar understood the times, and they knew what Israel should do. And so in our reporting, it's not just simply facts, but bringing from a biblical perspective so that people can understand where we are today prophetically, and understand what is happening, not through just a secular lens, but a biblical lens. So when you see people getting off the airplane from Nefesh B'Nefesh or from the fellowship, that this is prophecy unfolding. This is what's happening. And so we live in incredible times, biblical times, and I think for all of us it can be said, like it says in the book of Esther, that we have all been called to hear for such a time as this. And may the Lord strengthen us for such a time as this, that we can finish our race and our jobs and our missions, that we can please the Lord and do what he's called us to do.
Well, amen to that. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to all of our panelists, Chris Mitchell, Felice Friedson, Stephen Briggs. It was a pleasure to hear your insights. Thanks.